There's a house in the woods, hidden deep among the trees, where few people have dared to venture. The locals speak of it in hushed tones, telling stories of strange occurrences, unexplained disappearances, and things that just didn't seem to make sense. It is a place that's known to those who have lived in the town for generations, but it's avoided by most. No one quite remembers when the stories began. The house in the woods had always been there, like a shadow in the trees, and it was a subject of curiosity for those new to the area. The locals often warned outsiders about the dangers of the woods, telling them not to stray too far. But young people, especially those with a love for adventure, were always drawn to it. One such person was Emma, a young writer who had just moved to the small town. She had heard the rumors about the house but was skeptical. To her, they sounded like nothing more than superstitions, stories passed down through generations. As the days went by, her curiosity grew. The more she heard, the more she felt compelled to find out for herself. One evening, while having a drink at the local bar, Emma overheard a conversation between two elderly men. They were speaking about the house in the woods, their voices low and serious. One of them, a man named Mr. Harper, said something that caught her attention. "There's a house in the woods where the walls are covered in strange symbols," Mr. Harper murmured. "People say the house disappears when you try to find it again." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She knew then that she had to see this house for herself. The next morning, she set out into the woods, determined to find it. Armed with nothing but a backpack and a sense of adventure, she made her way through the thick trees, following an old trail that had long since been forgotten. As she walked deeper into the forest, the atmosphere grew heavier. The sunlight barely filtered through the dense canopy above, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and move. The air was thick with the scent of moss and damp earth, and the further Emma went, the quieter the woods became. It was as though the forest itself was holding its breath. Hours passed, but Emma didn't give up. She knew she was getting closer. Something inside her told her that she was on the verge of discovering something extraordinary. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she stepped into a small clearing, and there it was. The house. It stood there, half hidden by the trees, its wooden walls old and weathered by time. The house was unlike anything Emma had ever seen before. Its windows were cracked, and the roof had begun to sag, but it wasn't the house's condition that made Emma's heart race. It was the strange symbols that covered the walls. The symbols were unlike any language she had ever encountered, intricate and swirling, as though they were alive and shifting. Emma approached the house cautiously, her breath catching in her throat. The symbols on the walls seemed to pulse, their shapes changing slightly with every step she took. She reached out a hand and touched the rough surface of the wood. The moment her fingers made contact, she felt a jolt of energy, as if the house itself had reacted to her touch. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she instinctively stepped back. She didn't know why, but she felt an overwhelming sense of unease. Something about this place wasn't right. But the urge to explore overwhelmed her, and Emma stepped inside. The door creaked open without resistance, as if it had been waiting for her. The interior of the house was dark and musty, the air thick with dust. The walls were covered in more symbols, some etched deeply into the wood, others faint and barely visible, as though they had been carved by hand long ago. As she ventured further into the house, the atmosphere grew colder. The symbols seemed to shift again, growing more complex, and Emma began to feel disoriented. She glanced over her shoulder and saw the door she had entered through had vanished. Panic surged through Emma as she realized that she couldn't remember how to get back. The house seemed to stretch and warp, its layout constantly shifting. The symbols on the walls twisted and turned as if they were mocking her, changing every time she looked away. She ran through the house, trying to find her way out, but the more she tried, the more disoriented she became. The house seemed to be playing tricks on her mind, the walls closing in, the floorboards creaking underfoot as if the house itself was alive. After what felt like hours, Emma found herself standing in the same clearing where she had first seen the house. But something was wrong. The house, which had been so clearly before her just moments ago, was gone. There was nothing left but the trees and the empty space where the house had stood. She blinked, confused, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. She tried to retrace her steps, searching the woods for any sign of the house, but it was as though the house had never been there. The forest was silent and still, and there was no trace of the strange structure that had appeared so vividly before. Emma stood frozen in the clearing, her heart racing as she tried to understand what had happened. Had she imagined the whole thing? Had it been some kind of hallucination? But she knew deep down that she hadn't. The house had been real, and it had vanished, just as the locals had said. As the sun began to set, Emma reluctantly turned back toward the town. She couldn't explain what she had experienced, but she knew one thing for certain: the house in the woods was real, and it would always be there, waiting to be found by the next curious soul. The next morning, Emma spoke to the locals, asking if anyone had seen the house, but when she described it, no one seemed to know what she was talking about. They all shook their heads, telling her that she must have been mistaken, but Emma knew the truth. She had found the house, and she also knew that, just like the story said, it would disappear whenever someone tried to find it again.